Hey tribe, hope you're doing well. Let's continue on with the Holodomor and government-sponsored food shortages that turn into famines. Pol Pot, Idi Amin, Stalin, Mao, they've all used famine to bend people to their wills. It's very important to read these things. On Pol Pot, there was a really good film by a well-known actress who produced it about the situation. It's really good and really moving. Very clear example of what can happen when socialism gets a hold of a nation, and how very quickly these things happen. So let's read some more about the Holodomor. Let's hear from Maria Chipkevich, who was born in 1927 to Kiriyorhord village in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast in Ukraine. And we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. Hold on. Okay, here we go. My father and mother didn't want to join the collective farm, and they came to take them to Siberia. Gulags, anyone? The interviewer asks, who came to take them away? Maria responds, it was a kind of police. They were called militia. They came to the house with rods. They took all the food we had. They took everything we had. We had an earth dugout. They took everything from there too. They starved people because they wanted them to go to the collective farm to work. They wanted to take my father to Siberia, but he ran away to Dnipropetrovsk. After some time, he found a place to live and brought my mother and me there. Interviewer, was your father a villager? Maria, my father was a villager, a farmer. Interviewer, did you have brothers and sisters? Maria, I had one brother and he died. My mother and father died. The whole family. My grandmother, my father's brothers. My mother came back from the village and died the next day. I was beside her. Interviewer, your mother died? Maria, yes. My father buried her and said that we have to go back home because there's a house there, and here we only have one small room. Interviewer, there was famine in Dnipropetrovsk as well? Maria, yes, but my father had found work somewhere there. I don't know what he did. He took me back to the village. We came to our house. There was nobody there, but it was harvest time, and the rye and the wheat were being harvested. People collected grain stalks, and my father went to collect some. He was badly beaten. Interviewer, who beat him? Maria, probably the police, the militia. They beat him. My aunt said he was injured very badly. I was small. I was going around the village asking for some water to drink. Interviewer, you were left an orphan? Maria, I was left an orphan. I was left alone and I went around the village. They buried my father at the cemetery in our village, in Kiriyorhord. Interviewer, when your father died, what happened to you? Maria, people told me to go to the village council and tell them that you've murdered my parents, and now I have nowhere to go. And that's what I said. I went to the village council and sat there crying. The head of the village council came and asked why I'm crying. I told him, I don't have anywhere to go. Do what you want with me. I'm not leaving here. And he took me by the hand and took me to another room, and then took me by the hand and took me to an orphanage. What's important to understand is there was famine in Dnipropetrovsk also, which was a large city. It wasn't just the kulaks who were being starved. All the food was being taken and sold on the international market for cash to fund socialist programs. These same things will happen here, and it won't just be those who are unwilling to conform, because the rules will be poured across the entire nation, and everyone's going to suffer. It's going to be worse in cities, because food's not grown there. And you have to feed the cities to keep the people there and keep them working. It's just going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. If we go into socialism, communism, which we're already well down that road, it's just going to be a real mess. And you need to prepare for that. You need to be ready for what it's going to be like when there's no food, when having food is against the law. They're going to try to starve people into submission, as they have done successfully throughout history, time and time and time again. Understand that food is a weapon. It's great to have all these, ARs and Glocks and stuff. I think everybody needs to exercise their Second Amendment. But food is such an incredible right that it isn't even mentioned in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Why? Because it's so obvious. And because it's so obvious, it's an obvious weapon. Be prepared for that. Let's go to another one. Alexander and Nadia Severin, born 10th of March 1922 in Donetsk. They explain the situation in Kramatorsk City, Donetsk Oblast, during the Holodomor. Alexander and Nadia. Alexander, we often went to Kramatorsk City. These unfortunate, hungry children, they couldn't get into the villages. Nadia, entering the villages was prohibited so that nobody would see the people in the villages who were, understand, internal passports, restrictions on movements. Yeah, the internet's awesome. It's hard to conceal things, but it doesn't mean they won't try it and that they won't be successful. For every move, there's a counter move. Credit score, anyone? Social credit score, anyone? It's already happening in China big time to keep people in line. They're already talking about how wonderful it is here and all the socialists want it here. Get ready for that. Alexander, the word was osteplenia, cordoned off. The internal forces of the NKVD guarded the villages and wouldn't let people in. These unfortunate and hungry children left other oblasts for Donetsk, and they usually stayed at the train stations and in parks. I remember, for example, very many dead at Lenin Park, not only adults, but children as well. Alexander, from the time of the famine, I will never forget the masses of dead at the Kramatorsk train station. People came on trains, not only on passenger trains, but any transport they could get to the city where you could get a piece of bread. And from these wagon trains, they would throw out the dead right onto the rails. Sometimes they threw out those who hadn't died yet. I remember this. One more. Tetiana's story. Tetiana Pavlichka, born 1922 in Verbivka village, Kiev Oblast, explains how villagers tried to trade their valuables for food, describes the death from starvation of her cousins. In 1932, when the taxes were levied and everything was taken away, people started to trade their valuables. A lot of people from the village went to Russia. At that time, you could still get through the border. Later on, you couldn't go anymore. But at the beginning, people still went and took whatever valuables they had and traded them for rye or wheat or whatever food they could get. Later on, nobody could go. You couldn't take the train. People walked. People from other villages came to houses, bringing their embroidered shirts or whatever valuables they had to trade them for a piece of bread to feed their children or themselves. And they died on the roads. Nobody had anything. This was unthinkable. I know who died from my family. My cousins died. One cousin joined the collective farm. He was supposed to feed the horses and other animals. He thought he could get something to eat there, but he died there. There was no food for the horses. His name was Ivan Klemenko. My maiden name was Klemenko. Idovorkia Klemenko. Ilyushka Klemenko. Tetila Klemenko. My cousins, who lived close to us, they all died. My aunt died in 1933. When the grain stalks were growing, she ate the green stalks and died. Her whole family died. Only one daughter miraculously survived. She lives in Poland now. Yeah. So people selling everything they had to buy grain. There was the communists they set up, they weren't stupid, right? So they set up places, trading stations, for the kulaks to come and trade their valuables for food, flour, bread, whatever they could get. And they brought their gold and their silver and other treasures that they had, anything they had. And the communists wound up, they would get 1.5 times the amount of gold from this process of leeching the people they were starving to death dry, leeching them dry of all their valuables, little by little, just to give them food. Not even enough to live on, just enough to starve on. They didn't want them alive. They just wanted everything they had to take it legally. So they couldn't be accused of murdering them. So there were laws put in place. One of the laws allowed you to take your valuables and trade it for food at the government trading station. Trade your gold watch for a pound of flour. Can't eat gold, but you can't eat flour. So they made 1.5 times the amount of gold through that process than they did through the mining processes. So what you have to understand is that, let's talk about Joseph. 7 years of plenty for 7 years of famine. He was a wise man. He saved up. And first, the people brought their gold and silver to get food from Joseph. Next, they brought their animals for food from Joseph. Next, they brought themselves and made themselves slaves for food. And that is how the Pharaoh, through Joseph, wound up owning everything in Egypt. Don't let the same thing happen to you. Be prepared. Look at history, understand what's coming, and understand what they will most likely use as weapons. They cannot go door to door taking everyone's guns. That's just not even possible. But they can make you hungry and change the paradigm and offer you food for your firearms. Think about that and prepare for it. God bless you all. Take care. Bye.